golden 90s, also known as the decade of alternative. Alternative rock might have been the peak of all the 90s, but there are other genres such as hip-hop, country, dance, pop, and various other genres. But the reason this decade is so memorable is for its entertainment value and its many scenes that were made. Let's take a tour. Kurt Cobain of Nirvana made a real difference when he brought grunge in the 90s. He also brought alternative forward. He made such an impact that pretty much everything about the 80s was pretty much forgotten, and should be. And this guy, let's just say, he made the record. The Spice Girls were a major icon during the 90s for most girls, female role models. Most girls would often pretend to be one of the Spice Girls. I tell ya, good role models. What the Spice Girls was for the girls, Hanson was for the boys. A boy band group. Tony Hawk did skating culture a real favor when he brought skateboarding back into popularity through the X Games. The Gothic culture supermodel, also known as Marilyn Manson, though some claimed that he lunged the entire scene into popularity, I'll just say that his fashion sense is popular amongst mall goths. The band that should have gained some recognition, but is the band that brought forward the Gothic scene, and is by far the leader to it. Robert Smith was declared the Gothic godfather. But anyways, even though they were introduced in the 80s, Converse shoes were made very popular during the skating trend. Baggy pants were very popular for boys. It became a fad after MC Hammer's big hits, creating what's known as baggy pants. Another major fad, but mostly for girls, was wearing butterfly clips. The one who decorated hers like a Christmas tree was considered the most popular. Wearing backwards caps was considered a trend during the 90s for guys, but it was also popular amongst skater culture. Khaki cargos lunged into extreme popularity during the 90s. It was a huge trend for guys, especially definite fashion for skaters. Made popular after Britney Spears' Baby Hit Me One More Time, most girls began wearing this new trend of fuzzy palms in their pigtail hair. Skirts was definitely a popular fashion for girls as well. It is also a way to deceive many of the horn dogs. More than just a simple fad, skateboarding was even more than a trend. It was brought back in the 90s and established, much like surfing was brought back. For the 90s, video games that were popular were mostly on Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis. However, most of them did arcade-style stuff. An arcade still doesn't go out. To be honest, this is one of the best years of gaming ever. What was brought back in the 90s eventually expanded with a lot of skating tricks and other things. But hey, this was an easy lifestyle, an easy way to dress, and not much needed to look like a skater. All you needed to do was know how to skate. Both a very popular sitcom and a woman who started a very popular hairstyle. This show was one of the best sitcoms of the 90s and set a real example for later sitcoms, all the way to that 70s show. Apparently, these things went out of style by this decade. Still, a very memorable sitcom. TV shows such as Roswell were big hits in the 90s. Whether they were science fiction, fantasy, or they were about dark fiction or whatever they be. Point is, real huge imagination and creativity was involved with these shows. They were more than the sitcoms. Here's a real treat for the kids. Cartoons such as Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, the Superheroes, and all the others such as Freakazoid were really well animated and really good for the eyes. Being that these were really well, rich and deeply well animated by some of the best people in the world. Movies of the 90s such as Braveheart or Titanic or The Crow or Austin Powers or whatever, even Dragonheart, these was quality entertainment, quality movies, really good stuff. In fact, absolutely nobody we can name of could really pull something like this off ever again. It's definitely one of those bet you can't do it again things. Being that the 80s was a bit embarrassing and the 2000s pretty much lax. The 90s had it all. One of the biggest scenes of the 90s was known as grunge, a scene that was not dedicated to fashionistas or flashy people or anybody into major high fashion. This is just for simplistic and easygoing people who didn't really care to dress really appealing. Just dressed whatever they could throw on. But that became the scene, and it sure as hell still applies today. The Gothic scene basically came by the late 90s, and it was basically dedicated to the people who preferred to be rebellious. They preferred darker and much more creepy looking fashions over fashionistas, preppies, or looking pretty dirty. This is also for the simplistic but generally dark